I'm going to introduce Heidi Ogle and Neil Wynn from Assateague National Seashore, and they're going to be doing a webinar today on high accuracy field data collection. And so Heidi's a GIS specialist in our office, and she has been doing, acting as our GPS coordinator here, and been doing a lot of outreach and research into mobile field data collection, including high accuracy. And Neil Wynn has been doing high accuracy GPS data collection for many, many years, and also did detail in this office a couple of years ago, and really got some of the employees here up to speed. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Heidi, and she'll go ahead and get started. And just a couple of notes, everybody is muted, and Heidi and Neil will ask for questions when, at the appropriate times, and at that time you can either raise your hand and they'll unmute you, or you can type a question into the chat box. Does that about cover it, Heidi?
That's about it, yeah.
All right, great, thank you.
I would also note that this is being recorded, and we'll make it available on our website probably by the end of the afternoon today. So you guys can feel free to just listen and take, because we'll make this available later for you guys to be able to look at again. So with that, we'll move on. Yeah, thanks for everybody for joining us. This is kind of our plan for today. We're going to be covering a lot of information. It'll be a miracle if I get through this in 25 minutes. And I think Neil's probably going to go a little over too. So we're going to, if there's plenty of time at the end for question and answers, we'll do that. We might go over. If we do, feel free to just, if you have another meeting or whatever, feel free to bail. We won't be offended, but we will have a lot of information. I would say in this presentation, there's going to be a little something for everyone. We're going to go to 0 to 60 here, probably pretty fast for some of you. So if we lose you, just try to stick with us, because there is very likely you're going to run into some of these issues at some point when you start looking at high accuracy data collection in Collector. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle to high accuracy data collection with Collector, so I'm going to be kind of jumping around a little bit. It may seem really disparate, but that's because these are some big things that I came across when I was working through some of these workflows, and I wanted to make sure that you guys got them. So it may seem a little patchy here and there, but it's likely that at some point you're going to want to come back to this to recall some of the things that we talked about in here. So the first thing I wanted to get everybody on the same playing field is because of acronyms. So there's a lot of new acronyms floating around out there that I wanted everyone to be aware of. Recently, the GPS subcommittee changed their name to GNSS PostNav. GNSS stands for Global Navigation Satellite System. Basically what that means is we're not just working with the American satellite constellation anymore. We're also looking at the Russian GLONASS, the European Galileo, the Chinese Beidou, there's an Indian constellation, a Japanese constellation as well. So when we're talking GNSS, we're talking about using more than just one constellation. SBAS stands for Satellite-Based Augmentation System, and that essentially refers to correcting your data in real time via satellites. And what we're used to here in North America is WAS. So on your Trimble device, when you would WAS enable that, you're basically enabling SBAS. It's the same thing, it's just in North America, it's called WAS. And then RTK, many of you may be familiar with that. That's what we commonly think of as setting up a base and a rover system, and then doing some survey grade surveys at a particular location. So that's something we've had for a long time, but that's working solely, in one particular little area. You're not really connecting outside to anything. You're just working with your base station and your rover. What we're moving to now with Collector and other real-time data collection devices is this real-time network approach. So basically accessing real-time data correction streams, either through the internet or through satellite systems or through a park radio, which we'll get to some of that later. Essentially, real-time networks are subscription-based services. Some are paid and some are free, and we'll look at those. They each have their pluses and their minuses. There's no real one perfect approach for anybody anymore. There's lots of different ways to get your job done now, and they're much cheaper than they used to be. Another word many of you may have heard is NTRIP. Tim Smith over in the Resources Information Services Division has somewhat recently set up a NTRIP caster. And what that basically is it's a server that you can use if you want to get some very high grade, some very
hey, Heidi.
Great accurate information. Uh-oh, yeah?
This is Neil. I just looked at the presentation you had before, and I think you're supposed to be displaying stuff right now, and I am currently not seeing that.
Okay, I didn't even think to ask if everybody can hear me right now and see me. Let me see what I'm doing wrong.
We're going with a very minimalist presentation right now. So
very minimalist presentation.
Your interpretive dance is excellent.
Thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Okay, well now we're definitely going to be going over on time because I blew it. Let me see the chat. Okay, stand by. Well, the good news, everyone, is that you didn't really miss anything on those slides. Basically, I just presented the agenda and also the the acronyms slide. So not too much was missed in terms of visuals. Sorry about that for anyone who missed that. Okay, so Neil, are we still good? Are we good now? Can you see me now?
I am only seeing the blank page of IMR GIS webinar. I could be the only person though, so.
Okay, can somebody chat in and let me know what's going on? That would be really helpful. If somebody else can let me know if they can see my screen, I would really appreciate it. Being the same as Neil. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, if one of you can let me know.
There it is.
Okay, hallelujah. Apologies, guys. We're being awfully technical. We're not very technical here, apparently. Let me back it up just so you guys can see what you missed, which wasn't much. Basically, I had the agenda up here showing where we're going with this webinar. The next, just in the acronym screen, which I kind of talked through, so you didn't miss much there. And this is where we're at. So it looks like we're good to go now. Sorry about that, technical difficulties. In terms of project accuracy requirements, what we're going to be looking at today is survey grade and mapping grade. So sub-meter and sub-foot data collection. We're not going to be looking at recreation grade, which is basically just using your internal location chip in your mobile device. We're going to be looking at devices that are going to be Bluetoothing or pairing to external receivers to do differential correction. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, high accuracy data collection. Now, I should note that I was not going to get into this fight, but once I finally filled out an entire page full of reasons not to buy an iOS device, I figured it's a conversation that needed to be had. So I'm just going to go through these. Everybody has their own approach to this, but this is what I've come up with through a lot of testing and a lot of paying attention to what's going on out there in this sector. We recommend one particular device here called the Juniper Geode. That device will not work on iOS devices. And the reason for that is iOS is a closed platform. So there's a lot of receivers that exist out there that will not work with iOS devices. And the Juniper Geode, which is a really great device, is one of them. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking at going iOS route, you'll need to make sure that any high accuracy receivers that you want to Bluetooth to are supported by Apple. Another issue that a lot of people have been running into, I think you may have seen it out on the listservs, was that there's users randomly being logged out in the field. If that happens to you and you're 5 miles out of trail and you're not in a connected environment, you're going to have to walk all the way back and get in a connected environment to log back into Use Collector. I can't even begin to fathom how much that would drive me crazy. So something to look at. I know that there's a lot of testing going on this. They haven't figured out how to fix it yet, to my knowledge. Another big bug that's out there right now is, and I don't think they're even looking at fixing this one, is if you have a editable and a non-editable feature layer in a web map and you have push only enabled, you will not be able to sync your data up. You'll need to turn push only off or disable push only in order to sync that data back up. That's a big one that I ran into and drove me crazy. Also, in terms of the location chip in the iOS device, it is part of the cellular chip. So if you want to have location on your device, then you're going to have to buy an extra, you're going to have to spend more money basically to get the chip that allows you to have the data plan, even if you don't want to pay for the data plan. So you're spending more money to get something that's already built into an Android device. Another issue in terms of iOS is none of the iOS devices have data or location chips that have WAS enabled or are set up for the L5 band, which is a whole new and different discussion that we're not going to get into today. I'm happy to talk to anybody offline about the L5 band though. Some cool stuff going on there. So in other words, basically no iOS device that's unpaired will be able to collect better than 5 meters because the location chips can't correct for where you are. Another issue to look at is there is no data collection STIG approved at either the NPS or the DOI level at this point, so we really don't have a secure protocol for working with data with iOS. And then speaking of security issues, if you are interested in working with sensitive data, the only way you can reach the portal on an iOS device is through a networked Wi-Fi. So that can be a very big limiting factor for a lot of parks that don't have a networked Wi-Fi. And then one thing that drove me nuts last year is I was trying to sideload base maps onto an iPad and I struggled for days with iTunes. So if you're not an iTunes whiz, you may really get frustrated working with trying to sideload base maps onto your device. And then my personal thing is they're just not ruggedized and their screens aren't set up for outdoor use. So they can be really frustrating when you're dealing with sunlight and rugged conditions. Their batteries are not optimized for a full 8 hours of data collection. So if you plan on doing a full 8 hours, you better bring an additional battery or some sort of power system in order to back that up. And then finally, the iPad Pro, which would be our recommended device because it's the best one. That one is twice the price of a Samsung Tab Active 2, which with everything above it, I don't know why you would pay twice as much for half as much. So that's my take on it. That's my approach from iOS. Everyone has different opinions, but those are my reasons for recommending Android over iOS. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a data collection STIG out there for Androids right now. This is not for iOS devices. This is only for Android. If you were to get a Windows 10 data collection device, then you would just get the NPS image on it. So this is set up just for Android. Basically, there's two different scenarios that you would come across if you're in a park. One, you would have you would be using a device that would be shared between multiple users. If that's the case, you would want to request the NPS shared use data collection STIG. The way that basically works is the device can be used between multiple people. There is no Bison connector email on it. And then you would use your Windows Active Directory password when you get to Collector to log in. To set that up, you would essentially submit a help ticket with your IT guy. IT would then submit that request to MOS 360, who would then send you an email. That email would contain a QR code or a hyperlink that you could use to install this configuration, and then it also provides a password that you would use at that install. So it's really actually really quick and painless to install these. Doesn't take much time at all. The other option that is presented to you, you would be able to have the data collection with email STIG. That's if you have a device that you're not going to be sharing with other people. You're going to be the only person collecting on that device. You can get this particular configuration. And it's the same thing. You submit a help ticket, and then this information is sent to you by email. But basically, that gives you email on your device, and you would also need SZIP in order to do your two-factor authentication with that particular STIG. I would note, though, that SZIP it only works in connected environments. So you'll want to make sure that SZIP is running before you leave the office, because otherwise you could get outside and nothing works. Okay, so jumping around a little bit here, as I said, we're going to be kind of all over the map a little bit here, but to move on to real-time correction services, backtrack a little bit. In terms of Trimble, what we used to do is we'd go outside, we'd collect data, we'd come back in, and then we would post-process and differentially correct that data. Well, that's not part of the Collector workflow. With Collector, we're doing real-time data correction in the field. We're not doing any post-processing back in the office. So a lot of the work is done up front, and then very little is done on the back end with the Collector workflow. And what real-time correction services do is they improve the accuracy of your receiver. And they're able to do that through a subscription and a connection. So subscriptions can be free, but they can also be paid. And then there are lots of different connection types, the most common one being cellular and satellite. And then just recently we learned that we're also able to get correction services through the radio, through a park radio. And we'll look at that here in a little minute. In order to use a real-time correction service, you're going to need a third-party app in order to configure how all that information comes in. And we're looking at on the right-hand side here the EOS Pro Tools application. That's basically my configuration to Tim's Ntrip server it's here in Denver. So I asked him for a username and password. He got me set up, and then in order to collect data, now I can go outside here in Denver because I'm within 200 kilometers of his station and get some pretty accurate data using that. So if you're nice and close to Denver, you can use his. Otherwise, you can set one up in your park, and we can talk about some of that also later. The three big pieces of information you're going to need to know in order to do this high accuracy workflow correctly is you're going to need to know the projections for your data, for your base map, and for your correction services. You'll need all three of those pieces of information in order to correctly set up a location profile for high accuracy data collection. So keep that in mind as we work through these next few slides. Okay, so this is basically a diagram for something that we've all probably been using lately, which is WAS. This has been out for a long time. The way it essentially works is there's, CORS base stations all over the country, and they know exactly where they're at. So when the satellite tells them, they're at this location and that location is 1 foot at 90 degrees, they send that information back into a master station, which then pushes it up to a satellite or WAS satellite, which then pushes that back down to you and tells you, okay, you're close to that base station, so you need to correct 1 foot at 90 degrees. That's basically how WAS works. But of course, because WAS is going both directions through so the ionosphere and atmosphere and whatnot, it's not as great as if you're working just here on the land. So that's why you're looking at about a ½ meter to maybe 2 meters in box canyons and covered canopy situations when it comes to WAS. So it's not going to be as accurate as the other solutions, but it's free and you don't have to do anything. So that's a major, major bonus to using WAS. So if you're looking at sub-meter and your nice open skies, you're probably going to be just fine with WAS. Another option out there for real-time network is Hemisphere Atlas. This is a paid subscription service. It can get you down to about 8 centimeters, but you're going to pay for that. So this is a paid subscription service. In order to get anything sub-foot, you're looking at about $1,600. If you want to get down to centimeter, you're looking at about $2,300 a year. The big issue with this is that if you lose your lock to those satellites, it can take up to at least 10 minutes to reach convergence again. So working in closed canopy situations or box canyons, this is really not a good solution for you because it's going to slow down your ability to get your job done big time. I would note in the Midwest and Southeast regions, the Trimble VRS Now satellite subscription service is available and would probably be a good solution for those regions if you're not in a closed canopy situation. So this is basically that configuration for that. And then moving on to Ntrip. So this is what our configuration would look like if you wanted to put your own Ntrip server in at your park. What you would need to do is install a base station and then cast that information or serve that information over to Tim's Ntrip caster here in Denver. There are 3 major ingredients to pulling off this recipe. Essentially, the first thing is money. You need at least $7,000 to get going because the very beginner level of entry is about $7,000, but the recommended base station setup is about $20,000, and that's a Trimble Net R9. So essentially, we'll walk through exactly how this works, but you would set up your base station, and then you would need some support from IT and from maintenance because you're going to have to install that base station probably on your headquarters building and then pipe it through into the network. So you're going to need IT for that as well. If you want to do any collection, if you're going to use this in your park, then you're going to need to have cell phone coverage in your park because it's going to be coming to you from a cell phone tower. So if you don't have cell coverage, this is not a good solution for you. One bonus to this approach, though, is that this data does come back to you. The correction service comes to you in NAT 83 2011. So if you are doing what you're supposed to and your data is all in NAT 83 2011, which is the national reference frame, then you're ahead of the game. It's going to help you do one less data transformation. So that's pretty cool. Now, this is something that we just learned about recently in the, what's it called, the Geospatial Insights. Tim was able to pull off this configuration. So for parks that don't have internet, you can actually do this Same sort of approach, only instead of running it through your cell phone tower, you would run it through your park radio tower. So this is a solution. I don't know a ton of information about it. Tim and I have talked about it a little bit, and this is basically the configuration. But again, you would need a lot of money and support from maintenance and IT, but you would also need to be able to get this data streamed into your park radio frequencies. So you need to talk to your park radio operator as well. If you need more information on that, please give Tim Smith a call and he can help work that through. But he was able to successfully test this out here in Denver over at the Fed Center a couple months ago. So now to get into a very scary slide. I'm going to kind of walk through each of these so you understand how this configuration works. So this is if you install a base station at your park and you want to be able to run either through the park radio network or through the N-Trip caster, this is how that would work. The pink system is if you have cell coverage. The green system is if you don't and you're going to run through your park repeater. These you can actually do both in your park if you have a NetR9. I'm not sure which base station receivers have ports for both serial and Ethernet. Maybe all of them do. I'm not really sure, but you can talk to Tim about that. So basically, here we go. So on the top left, you'd install your base station probably on the roof of your park headquarters. You'd plumb that down into your base station receiver. Then using your Ethernet port, you would connect your base station receiver to the network and stream out that information to Tim's NPS N-Trip caster here in Denver. Then he pushes that up into a cell phone tower and you come down with your little MiFi, or if you have a data plan on your mobile device, you would need the MiFi. That correction information would come into your MiFi or your device, which would then plumb back into your GNSS receiver. So in the case of an Arrow or a Geode, it would be coming into that pack. And at the same time, that pack is receiving from the GNSS antenna, it's triangulating your position with all the GNSS satellites out there. So you're getting all the satellite information at the same time you're getting your real-time data correction. That information then gets pushed over to your mobile device from a Bluetooth connection, and Collector starts ingesting that information. So that's basically the configuration from the N-Trip caster. If you have if you're looking at doing the park radio approach, then you would push that data from the base station receiver via the serial port to the park radio network. That can also get pushed out into park repeaters. So if you have reception on your park radio, you could be able to use this approach. That park repeater, the park network radio network, would push that information over to your radio antenna, which would be in your backpack and in your GNSS backpack, which obviously would need a nice heavy lithium battery to go with it. So we're starting to look at some pretty heavy time out in the field. That park radio would then be serial ported over to your GNSS receiver, which again at the same time is receiving those GPS or GNSS locations and being corrected in real time. Once again, pushed over via Bluetooth to your Collector application. Now, I should note on the bottom left that there's two applications that are running on your tablet at any one time. Collector is actually doing the least amount of work in this configuration. The mobile app is doing the most. So in terms of the Arrow, that would be your EOS Tools Pro, or with the Juniper Geode, it would be Juniper Connect. And basically what those applications are doing is it's receiving that RTK signal over the internet or from the radio network, and then it's sending that correction information to the GNSS receiver, correcting it, and then sending that NEMA stream to Collector. So it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And then Collector basically receives that information, it performs any geographic transformations that need to happen, and then it prioritizes which receiver it's using. So whether it's using your high accuracy receiver or native receiver. And that's really all that Collector's doing. So it's pretty low amount of work going on the Collector side. Now, if you have any questions about this particular configuration, again, I would say call Tim Smith. He can speak to it with a whole lot more. He set up this whole thing, so he can speak to it much more accurately than I can. Okay, so if you don't have the money or you don't have those three ingredients to pull off an NPS network to put a base station on the NPS network, an option for you would be UNAVCO. So what that is basically it's an NSF cooperative set up to share access to geodetic resources, because we all know this stuff is extremely expensive. So what NSF did is basically provided some grants to study like plate tectonic shifts and whatnot. And so through this UNAVCO system, you can get a free account and access real-time data correction streams over the internet. This basically works because there's about 700 base stations, or a little more than that, set up across the western United States and Alaska. You'll notice out there in Nebraska, and the further east you go, the less you have. It's because they're really looking at tectonic shifts, which obviously occur over on the Pacific side. So there's a whole bunch of base stations across the western United States and Alaska that you can use to correct in real time. This is a real-time network, and when that data correction stream is sent back to you, it comes back to you in ITRF 08. Like I mentioned, Tim's system comes back to you in NAT 83 2011. So you got to keep those in mind when you're looking at setting up your location profile in Collector. I would note, though, that this is only going to be accessible if you have cell coverage. There is no piping this across your park network. That's not a possibility. You'll have, in order to use UNAVCO, you definitely have to have cell coverage wherever you're working. You can achieve sub-foot corrections as long as you're within about 200 kilometers of one of these stations. Fortunately, here in IMR, almost all of our parks are within 200 kilometers of one of these UNAVCO base stations, with the exception of just those two down there on the bottom. Sorry, Texas, you guys are in bad shape. I would note, though, that Texas Department of Transportation does have a very extensive network for N-trips, but I'm not really sure if you can pay them or how you can get in touch with them. I haven't gone there yet. My apologies, didn't have time for that one. But for you parks down there in Texas, check out Texas Department of Transportation's N-trip real-time network. You may be able to get on board there. Okay, switching up a little bit again, moving on to the Esri GNSS metadata fields. This came out as part of the high accuracy workflow about 2 years ago. And what this basically is it appends these 18 fields onto the back end of your attribute table. Essentially you go to GitHub and you download this tool. This tool will then run and on whichever feature class you'd like it to run on, and then it appends these fields to the back end of your attribute table. At this point, it's for points only, so this does not work with lines and polygons. That request is in and hopefully will be met soon. We don't have a date or anything at this point for lines and polygons, but this does work for points. And what a collector basically does is it recognizes those fields and it auto-populates them when you're outside. So back in the Trimble days, when we come back in and did our post-processing, we would select what type of information we wanted reported back to us so we could see how accurate that data truly was. This is the same sort of idea, where it populates those fields and tells you, okay, here's your PDOP, your HDOP, how many satellites do you have, what kind of real-time corrections did you do, et cetera. So those first 14, those are all happening if you're not actually averaging anything, and then those are all being filled out. But if you are averaging, so if you set up your profile configuration to average points up to, say, 60 points or something, then those bottom 4 will be filled out. Let's see. So as I mentioned, there are scripts available that you can download from GitHub. They will help you automate your attribute creation and your pop-up configuration. And I would note here, because I have these hyperlinks built in, we are going to make this presentation available by PowerPoint. So you can also afterwards go to our website and click on these, and then they'll bring up the different hyperlinks that are pertinent to what we're talking about here. There's too much to talk about in 1 hour, so I'm going to just skip on through, but feel free to look at those from our website later. Okay, this is something that many of you may have heard of recently, is this base maps issue in Collector. It was going around on the listserv, so I really wanted to take a minute to talk about these. Base maps with Collector can be kind of a pain. A lot of the base maps that are available in ArcGIS Online are not available to take offline. So a lot of times you're going to make a web map and you're going to pull it up in Collector and you don't see the download button. Well, the reason for that is probably because you have a base map that is not supported for exporting, so you can't take it offline. The one that definitely works just fine is that Esri imagery base map. Just the plain Jane one works great. So if you're just going to want to see where you're at on top of imagery when you're out in the field, just use that and you're fine. But if you wanted to use like USA Topo or something else, then you're going to have to go in and switch out your base map. In order to do that, you're going to have to go to Add, Search for Layers, and then set the organization to My Organization and look for Export. And that will bring up all the different base maps that Paul Heffler and a variety of other people, I assume, set up to be able to download. Now, those are all going to be, or to switch out for your base map, I should say. So those are all going to be in Web Mercator. So anything that you're getting directly out of Esri is always going to be in Web Mercator. Just keep that in mind. If you want it to be in a different projection, you're going to have to make your own map files. So that's how you deal with the base maps problem in Collector. Skip Adel in the fire world, he had brought up the tile package creator recently. I actually got to play with that last summer when I was on a fire. It's in Esri Labs, so it's not, you know, part of the Esri suite of applications, but you can just Google tile package creator with a K and you'll find it and you can download it. And it's a really slick little application. And what it basically does is it takes any of the Esri base maps and it will create tile packages for you out of those. So if you have a particular one that you really like and you want to stay in Web Mercator, you can use this and just create your own tile base maps and then sideload them onto your device using the tile package creator. It's really slick. It works really, really well. But again, keep in mind, it's going to kick them out in Web Mercator auxiliary sphere only. You can't customize it to come out in some different projection system. So just keep that in mind with that. But if you're okay working with Web Mercator, go for it. And then finally, if you do want to make your own custom base map that's in your own projection system, then what you're going to have to do is create the map tile packages in ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap. I only did it in Pro, so I just included Pro here. If you want the very specific directions for doing this, let me know. I have a slide for this. I didn't want to chew up our time unless you guys are really interested in seeing that. So if you want to see that, let me know. I can show you guys exactly how to go through that. It took me about 3 days to piece together all the blogs, information, and stuff in order to really figure out how to do this in ArcGIS Pro. But this is the approach you would use to create your own custom tile package that you could then sideload onto your device. Okay, that was a lot of information, and now it's Neil's turn to talk about how to test and understand accuracy for GNSS data collector. Neil, are you there?
Partially. Does it sound like I'm here?
I can hear you.
Okay, well, I'm sorry for that.
Oh, you're great.
Would you like to continue controlling the slides as I talk through them, and I'll just tell you to advance when it's that time?
That's the plan.
Excellent. I like that plan. Let's go with that one. Okay, so I totally stole a lot of these slides from previous presentations, but what I would like to talk about is the ability to prove your accuracy when you're collecting data. So let's move on to the next slide that leads to one of the more important pieces of information, and it's dealing with the survey control. Survey control has been probably one of the more important pieces of collecting accurate data that we have needed to rely on for quite some time. In the Park Service and plenty of other places, we have not needed to rely on it as much because we maintained a workflow of people using a specific TerraSync Pathfinder Office process that was able to be defensible and was fine enough. But now we're into a particular world where there's a giant variety of ways to collect data and to collect what we can claim to be accurate data. And the gold standard for dealing with this is still survey control. If you can prove that you have accurately navigated to the coordinates on this survey control mark, then you can prove that your data are accurate. If you don't do this, it takes a heck of a lot of responsibility and work on the back end to document the work that you've done. So with that, I just want to, I think I'm going to say it one more time. Put in survey control, use Opus, and Opus Shared is a really good option too. Now that we have gotten through this, we recognize there is a ton of variety in the way that we're going to be dealing with the data in the future. Let's jump to the next slide. And this slide discusses a list of datums, and I'm going to read through every one of these and explain the 7 parameters, maybe even 14 of each one. Okay, that's not true. But there are 3 major datums we're looking at. There are a bunch of realizations of these, and there's a reason that all of these exist. The main thing I want you to get from this is that there are a lot of differences, and especially given the variety of ways we're going to collect data, because recognizing that even the workflow that Heidi talks about now and the one that I'm about to talk about, they're going to change when a new version of Collector comes out or a new piece of software comes out that we like to use. Some other things are going to happen in the background that we still need to be able to defend that we are collecting accurate data. So there is a list of datums, and that's great. Let's move on to the next slide. On this one, I'm displaying the on-the-ground differences of that list of datums I just showed. It's something that maybe some of you have seen me put up here before, but the thing I like to consider a takeaway from this piece of information is that if you start seeing, if you're in most of the continental US and you start seeing data differences, horizontal differences that are on the order of a meter, then you're probably dealing with some datum transformation stuff that happened. And that's probably not new news to most of us, but it's an important thing to keep in our heads. What is also worth mentioning, and we're going to get into a neat story that Travis tried to ruin everything down at Padre Island. No, he really found some very cool stuff down there. But that 1 meter difference is just a guideline. You see that there are dots down at the bottom, and those dots are nice. And then there are dots at the top of this white box, and they're nice. But what you're actually looking at with the points in the upper part is the tectonic drift that is a part of the WGS 84 and ITRF 08. And so anytime we're going to claim an accuracy, I'll just say this again, it's important we're able to prove how accurate we were. So let's move to the next slide and talk about a couple of the things that I have experienced in Collector. I'll reiterate that there are a lot of ways to go about this. This is the one that I have particularly used. I'm not advocating a workflow. I'm advocating understanding of the datums that are the datum transformations that are going on in the background. We're looking at two different screenshots, well, three, I guess, of the exact same scenario. This is, as Heidi was talking about, using in-trip streaming from something that works very similar to Tim's system. You see on the left, I'm looking at a Trimble R2, and on the right, an R10. The difference between these receivers, in my case, is one costs less than the other, and I didn't pay enough to get a very tiny circle. The R2 is cheaper, and the best I can get from it is 7 centimeters. That's fine by me. That's also 7 centimeters precision. What I want you to see in the second image here is the collector view of me being the blue circle with the triangle in it, and the error bar, or the error circle, is the blue line. But that bright blue dot in the middle, or near the middle, is the HQ1 survey control mark that I showed earlier. So I did something right in Collector, considering datum transformations, that allowed my position to fall within the positional error of the HQ1 benchmark. So if I were to collect data now, I could comfortably prove that I am within that, say, sub-foot, whatever it is I want to claim, I can say I'm comfortably within that. Now looking at the R10, the only difference here is that I'm zoomed in closer because the R10 is more accurate. You'll see it's got a 0.3 inch error circle, whereas the R2 had a 3 inch error circle. It's just because it's a better receiver, and I paid more money for it. And it falls on top of those 2 points that are, if you zoom in a little closer, you'll see one is cores 96 and one is NAT83 cores 96 and one is NAT83 2011. And I'm not trying to just drop datum transformation or datum names themselves to be cool. There are differences between them. They're mostly theoretical, but technically I could find those differences with a Trimble R10. So my main goal here is to show you that if you're going to claim centimeter accuracy, it's going to take a heck of a lot of responsibility to ensure that your data are collected that accurate. The easiest way to do it, and I'll keep saying it, is to is to occupy a survey control mark, just like the one I displayed earlier. And if you do that, and at the end of your data collection cycle that you find those points are still on top of each other, then everything is fine and your data are accurate. So that said, let's ruin everything and move to the next slide. So on the next one, we're looking at the location profile settings that I was just using in the previous screenshots. The way I went about this is simply clicking the three dots in Collector and clicking Settings, and then there's a location profile option, and you have the ability to select whichever location profiles you want to create. That said, you need to create them. In this case, the one that I'm using is entitled N83 to WGS. It was my own thing that I put in there, but the reason I named it this is the data I have coming from the in-trip streaming is in NAT83 2011, and the data in my map background is WGS84, which is effectively ITRF 08, but we're not going to go too deeply into that until we go on to the next slide, and let's do that. So on this slide, we're looking at the settings that were actually within the same screenshots that we were just looking at. The breakdown is that GNSS receiver coordinate system is NAT83 2011. The map is in our fabulous WGS 1984 Web Mercator auxiliary sphere, and there is a datum transformation. We can look up some information about that datum transformation, and I'm going to in a couple slides, and it's pretty worthwhile to know what's going on in the background, because again, we're taking where we have not dealt with datum transformations in the past. If we're going to use things like Collector in the future, which we're going to, we have to start paying to it and understand what they mean. So to reiterate, with these settings, I was able to use Collector, and my blue triangle or my white triangle and a blue dot was able to accurately navigate over my control point. Now pay attention to the background of this screenshot that I've got. You'll see those same points that I showed a couple slides earlier with all the datums displayed. And let's switch to the next slide. So we're switching correction sources. I went and I turned off my connection to the in-trip service, which gave me really cool accuracy or precision of just like 3 inches. And I turned on WAS. But what I did not do is I did not change the datum transformation that was going on, that location profile in the background. Notice that on the left here, it's still set to the incoming data are NAT83 2011, and the map is in Web Mercator auxiliary sphere. Now what happened is you'll see the blue circle with the white triangle is now on top of those other datum points that are about 1 meter away. And if you remember, I said if you're looking at a weird extra meter of horizontal difference, you're probably looking at a datum transformation. And that's exactly what's happening. So had I done this correctly, and I purposely did it wrong, had I done this correctly, that triangle that is me would be still perfectly over top of the benchmark in the lower right. But it's not. So let's fix it and switch to the next slide. The thing that's worth looking at is what WAS actually means. And Heidi talked about this. This was the datum that WAS provides you when it's giving you corrections. I have a couple of different options that people have been known to pick. The correct way to do this would be WGS84 is the receiver coordinate system. The map coordinate system is determined from the current map, and determined from the current map, there's nothing going on. This is the default location profile that goes on in Collector. I can get fancier than that, and I can state what is truly accurate of WAS. And it's truly accurate is never going to be truly accurate. Let's just go with that right now. WAS is providing a datum of ITRF 2008. The map coordinate system I have is Web Mercator auxiliary sphere. This is a new location profile, and you see there is some weird math going on down below where it says datum transformation of ITRF 2008 to NAT83 2011 plus ITRF 2008 to NAT83 2011. What that is effectively doing is adding one datum transformation and subtracting another. So I dug slightly deep into the datum transformations that were going on, and I copied them down in the very bottom of this slide. And I'm not going to read all these numbers off because that would be crazy. But notice that those two datum transformations have different names, but they have the exact same numbers involved. If we go back and look at the default policy where no transformation was taking place, it is effectively doing the same thing as the fancy one on the lower section, but it's just not doing as much math to get there. What's happening though is on either of these cases, if you look at the screenshot on the right, my red dot is measured to be right on top of the survey control mark. I made a measurement just because I wanted to see how far it was actually off. You'll see the precision is 24 centimeters, but I'm only 33 centimeters away from the mark. That's pretty dang good with WAS. There are a few reasons we're going to get to in a moment, which will hopefully not blow everybody's mind, but it hurts mine sometimes. But with both of these settings, because I turned on WAS, we were able to accurately navigate to within sub-meter of a survey control mark, therefore proving that the data we collect at this exact point are accurate to whatever the data we want to claim. So that said, let's move ahead on to the second slide and figure out, or the next slide, and figure out why it is that this can cause us more problems. And this one, I went down this road with Travis Clapp down in Padre Island, and it was really cool. So you've heard us talk about tectonic motion, and it's probably something that tends to get glossed over because we're dealing with millimeters and it's not really part of sub-meter data. But what we're finding is our real-time data are actually accurate enough to have to start worrying about this. So I'm looking at that same mark, which is HQ1 at Assateague, and just some more information about it. We have a velocity because the plates move. And if you look, there is a north velocity of 4.28 millimeters a year and an east velocity of negative 14 millimeters a year. Or the other way of saying that is we're moving west at 1.4 centimeters. So when you start talking about decades going by, this actually gets within some of our ability to measure it. And what Travis ran into was he was getting a consistent something like 25 centimeter offset with the data where he was using WAS. And where I said that WAS earlier transmits in ITRF 2008 was only partially true. ITRF 2008, if you look at the bottom of this slide, has a free-floating date stamp at the end of it. And WAS, because it's positioned all over the world, has to float freely in order for aircraft to navigate appropriately. So whenever WAS is transmitting something, it's always to the nearest 6-month period. So 2018.5 would be June 1st or whatever, would be 2018, versus the actual transformation that went on in the background, which was NAT83 2011 to ITRF 2008 version 2005. Long story short, what happened was 13 and a half years went by. And if we compare that the 13 and a half years times the velocity we're looking up at the top, 13 times 14 gets to be a lot. We're looking at 20, well, not 13 times 14, 13 times 14 millimeters gets to be 20.155 centimeters, which sounds awful close to Travis's 25 centimeters off that he was running down in Texas. The other way of saying this is WAS does not match the same version of ITRF 2008 that we're converting to, because the transformations can't possibly be a simple 7-parameter. The real takeaway from this is you cannot, unless you're doing tectonic motion calculations, you cannot defensively state that you are collecting NAT 83 2011 data using WAS with just your basic transformations. So a simpler way to go about it is to say you're never going to be any better than 50 centimeters when you're using WAS. But if you want to get fancy like Travis decided to do down there and do some cool calculations, you can do this and actually adjust, and you'll see that the data fall within centimeters on top of each other. It's getting a little bit crazy. So after that said, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so then I'm going to pass it back over to Heidi, and hopefully I didn't make everything worse for everybody.
Yeah, it's a complex world out there when it comes to all this stuff. Thanks, Neil. So basically, using the techniques that Neil had done, I went out in our parking lot and did the same thing. And because I talked to Jeff Clark up at Rocky, and he was wanting the same thing that I think probably everybody wants, and that's to look at these different recommendations that we're getting from Esri and really find out, okay, is this true? So when Neil was here a couple years ago, he installed a benchmark out in our parking lot, so we know exactly, where that is. So it's 2 years old with tectonic shift movement, whatever. Let's hope it's only a millimeter or two off from where it was in 2016. But anyway, based on that, I went out with our EOS Aero 100, which is not the best device on the market, but it'll get you sub-meter, and tested a bunch of different scenarios against that benchmark. So each of these little groupings on the left, you've got, I projected all the data in the same projection, and I made my own base map for them. So the idea was that I would only be doing a datum transformation based on the correction service. So in the top one, you've got NAT 83, so all the circles are the data's in NAT 83, just the very first one, NAT 83, the vanilla one. And then the colors represent what I was working off of, the correction service that I was working off of. So as you can all see, I clearly had that datum shift that Neil was talking about. So in that top left, my NAT 83, UNAVCO, NTRIP correction service, and the WAS correction service were clearly coming in at a datum shift. So I went back out today and did it again, and this is what I changed it to. So rather than having the former configuration, I switched it to ITRF08 and was able to get those points back in. Now, obviously, if I would have collected all of this data on the same day, I'm guessing that those oranges would be a little bit closer to the orange and so forth. They'd be a little bit more precise, but these are actually, different days. It's just the circles that I collected differently today. So essentially, with any of these configurations, if you have all of your data in vanilla NAT 83 and you haven't gotten it moved over to the national reference frame yet, like most of us, I've realized, are, and you want to create your own base map in NAT 83 and then use these corrections, this is kind of what you're working with when it comes to a $2,300 EOS Aero receiver. You're getting your sub-meter. In fact, you're getting pretty much, at least in open skies, you're getting, half a meter pretty much, and sometimes even better than that with any of these configurations. On that second group, obviously, I've got the NAT 83 in 2011, same with base map, and then with Web Mercator, all the data is in Web Mercator and using the Web Mercator base map. So again, I think you can see on the bottom left, obviously it's, 1 meter is the orange space, and then the pink is 1 foot. So everything came in pretty close in terms of its accuracy levels and everything with sub-meter. One thing I should note is the reason that there's multiple circles of the same color and multiple squares is that these were different averaging rates. So I went in and I did a no average for 1 point, and then a 5-click average, and then a 30-click average and a 60-click average. So everything's got 4 of them, and there was no significant difference between them. So if you're trying to collect a lot of data in one day, don't sit there for 60 seconds and collect a point. Just go for 5 and call it good, because I didn't see any difference at all, really. In fact, sometimes just one click actually got closer to the OPUS benchmark than the 60 clicks did. So I didn't see any significant difference there, something to keep in mind. And then finally, this morning, I went out last minute and did this because I think this is probably the configuration the vast majority of our IMR parks are going to be in. Chances are your data is in NAT 83 just the first one, the vanilla flavored one. You're probably going to want to just slap it on top of a web Mercator base map for your Esri imagery base map, and you're going to want to use WASP. And so this is basically the configuration that I did out in the parking lot today on that. And then the average positions is the difference in color there. So with just 1 point, as I mentioned earlier, actually just collecting the one location was closer to the OPUS benchmark than the whole 60 seconds that I spent out there on the green one. And that was the case with the other data as well. So essentially, this is what I was looking at this morning. I was collecting 22 satellites, 22 different GNSS satellites, and I had 3 WASP satellites that I was connected to. I used that ITRF-08 as the receiver because I was collecting in WASP, so I used ITRF-08 for that. And then Web Mercator was my base map, so that was my base map coordinate system. And then that was the datum transformation that Collector recommended that I do, which is that same sort of subtract and addition thing that Neil was mentioning earlier. So again, with the pretty common configuration, we had, let's see, that was a $400 Tab Active 2, a $2,300 EOS Aero 100, and then free WASP and free Collector. That's pretty much what we came up with. So the price is half as much as what we used to be paying. And yes, it is complicated, but we are able to get sub-meter for about a third of the price we were getting with Trimble. So that's what I have. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. I've already seen some coming up. So let me switch over to that screen so I can see all of your questions. Oops, I went too far. And the first question I saw in here was coming from Mark down at Grand Canyon. Let's see if I can pull it up. And Neil, really, this one's going to be for you. Oh, let me unmute Jeff Clark and Amanda Renner. Jeff Clark is up at Rocky Mountain National Park, and Amanda is at the Midwest Archaeological Center. They've spent a lot of time working on iOS devices, so if you guys have iOS questions, that Neil and I are kind of more Android and Windows mobile device or Windows 10 focused. If you have iOS questions, it might be better at answering that. So I asked them to join as panelists. And then Jeff, are you guys there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Got Jeff. Amanda, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Right on. Sounds good. Okay, so let me get to the questions here. Like I said, the first one I saw was from Mark down at Grand Canyon. Neil, I think this is mostly for you. We already have a core station in our park. Can this be adapted to work as our base station?
It would depend on a few things. If it is connected, because if we're looking at Collector, we're not working in a post-processing environment. If you're able to connect to it real time, meaning who owns it, if the park owns it, then I would get in touch with myself and or Tim, and it's likely we can help you rig up those same settings that Heidi was talking about earlier for in-trip through internet or radio.
Cool. Okay, I had another question come in from Rocky Rudolph. He says, does Collector record the datum transformation epic in the attribute table built by that GitHub Python script? Neil, you want to take that?
Sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that one either, Rocky. Amanda, Jeff, do either of you guys have an answer for that one?
Nope.
Nope.
Darn it. Okay. So a little bit black box on that one. I haven't even thought to look that one up. Sorry, Rocky. But I can look it up and get back to you on that. And then we had some other questions for people that wanted me to unmute them. So let me get there. Just a second, folks. And, oh geez, I'm losing my mouse. There we go. Okay, so Alan McCoy, I can't unmute you though. I see you have a question, but I can't unmute you. So if you can enter your PIN, then I can unmute you. Angela Jardine, I believe I have you unmuted. So if you have a question, go ahead and fire away. Okay, nothing from Angela. I just muted you again, Angela. So if you have a question, go ahead. Well, I'll unmute you. If you have a question, chime in. Anna San out at, let's see, which park is that? Lake Mead. What do you got, Anna?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Hello.
Hi. So I've noticed when you set up a field that is non-null, so instead of checking that box to allow null, it's non-null. In Collector, it seems to, and I'm using an iOS device as well, it seems to ignore all the required fields and allow you to submit the feature. Have we figured out a workaround for this yet?
I have not. I actually did read that whole thread. So what this comes from, everybody on the phone, is what Anna's trying to do is pull off some required fields in Collector, and I don't think that they have really gotten that one figured out completely from what I was seeing. It's pretty convoluted at this point, and I think they're going to have a better solution coming up, hopefully with Aurora. But no, the current situation is that you have to set the fields to not allow for null values when you publish them. And then you also need to do one other thing, which is set your field's feature template prototype so that it contains a null default value. It's not a perfect workaround at this point, because basically what that does is it puts a 0 or a space in that point when you create it, and so it doesn't require the user to fill it out, is my understanding. But I haven't actually had the chance to go out and test that yet, Anna. So I don't have a good answer for you. Jeff or Amanda or Neil, have any of you guys worked with those required fields and pulled that off yet?
No, I've tried it. I can't get it to work either. It's still just on Esri's end, as far as I know.
Yep. Neil, how about you?
Yeah.
I've only been measuring distances. Nope.
Yeah, Amanda, same thing?
Yeah, I've done that where I've set the field to not allow null values, and it works that way for me too. So I didn't know there was a workaround for it, so I just learned something new. But I obviously haven't tried that either.
Yeah, it's a little sticky, and I haven't seen anybody really pull it off yet, the Park Service. But yeah, and I think you're leading the charge on that one. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you.
Right, but
Anything else? Sure. Okay, Brian Deaton, go ahead. Brian, are you there? Okay. Oops. Okay, it looks like we've got Darren Swinney. Darren, are you there? A bunch of questions. Okay, Karen Anderson, go ahead. Are you there, Karen? Okay, Joshua Van Buskirk, are you there? Okay, Jennifer Hack Gaynor, are you there? Oh, I can't unmute you. Karen Folger, are you there? Karen, go ahead. Oh my goodness. Okay, Kay Bealey, are you there? Kay Bealey, are you there?
Yes, but I don't have a question.
Oh, okay. It's saying that you had a question. If you guys have questions, go ahead.
Oh,
and
I was
type
making.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was making comments early in the webinar that we couldn't see the screen.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So that may be what a lot of these comments were about.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Kay.
Sure.
Okay, if you have a question, go ahead and type it into the chat window, because that's about the only way I'm going to be able to tell the difference at this point. All right, everybody, sorry about that, figured it out. Let's see. Okay, Rory, I'm sorry if I'm gonna butcher your last name here. Rory Steeler said, suggested lowest cost equipment. Well, Rory, it really depends on what you're trying to do. If you're just trying to get sub-meter, I'd say go with the Samsung Tab Active 2, a Juniper Geode, and WAS. That's that will probably, depending on where you are, get you a meter, definitely 2 meters, in pretty much any situation except for really dense canopy. So yeah, it kind of depends on your situation and what you're trying to accomplish. If you're looking for survey grade, you can spend many thousands of dollars. So it just depends. Okay. Justin Mills, just wanted to note that we have a fleet of approximately 20 iOS devices in the field now, and about half of the stuff on the don't use Apple slide is seriously out of date or inaccurate. Good to know, Justin. I would love to hear more about that because that's all stuff that I put together myself in the last month. So I'm glad that you've solved some of those problems, and I'd love to hear more. Perhaps I can unmute you and you can tell us what that's all about. Let me see if I can find you on here. Okay, Justin, you're unmuted. Would you like to speak to that?
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute 3 different phones at once.
Right on.
So there's a couple of big things. So all recent iPads with the GNSS receivers and the cellular do have WAS enabled. And there's exactly one device under $1,000 that I've seen that's even available with an L5 receiver, and it's not available outside China. So it's not really a fair comparison. And we've run our iPads and iPhones up against a host of Android devices, and we're getting pretty much the same results out. And we don't need a data collector profile from OS 360 because iOS doesn't require security exceptions to do location data via Bluetooth. So to do it on Android, you have to turn on developer mode, enable mock locations, and trick Android into using the Bluetooth receiver, where iOS just does it out of the box. So we just use regular MOS 360 enrollments, no need to sideload the APK, just fire it up and go. Ruggedness hasn't been an issue. We throw our devices in OtterBox, LifeProof, ArmorX cases, and have yet to destroy one or seriously damage one. And our crews are not gentle. They're working long, hard days, 8 to 10-hour days, 4 or 5 days a week. We haven't had any problems with battery life, making it a single day, even with full days of collection. The one thing we have run into is having iPad Pros, but just the Pros, overheat and shut down if they get left in the sun in like 100-degree days, which I really can't feel that bad about. And the other thing is, price-wise, comparing iPad Pros, really not a fair comparison. Or a better comparison are the 6th Gen 9.7-inch iPads, and we've got about a half dozen of those in the field now, and those are the same price as the Active Tab 2. They're pretty much just as capable. The Pros get you more screen resolution and more things that are useful for the office, but for field work, said the 6th gens are really what we're going for. And for doing Portal, you can reach that with a hardwired Ethernet connector, same as with Android.
Cool. I was going to ask about that. So you've done that. You're the only person I know who's actually tested that. So you've actually been able to get your iOS device wired up through the Ethernet cable using which iOS device?
So I've done it on an iPhone 6, an iPad Mini 4, and a 6th Gen iPad 9.7-inch. Just nice. Using it's a cheapo $10 USB Ethernet adapter and then a Lightning to USB link.
Yeah, we were told that was legal, but technically NTS legal, but no one had tested it, so I couldn't say that was a legit way to go. So good, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it works great. We haven't had any issues with it, and we have enterprise Wi-Fi here in the office. It uses our MOS 360 profile certificates to log in, so yeah, it works out great.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Justin. I appreciate that. Did you have any other comments you wanted to make on that?
Not much. I mean, one of the biggest reasons that we like using iOS is because we have such a large fleet. We only have to deal with one version of iOS. All of our devices run the same version of iOS. We have one set of documentation, so we don't have to have different documentation across, the Juniper version of Android and the Samsung skin on Android and the Nokia skin on Android and the Motorola skin on Android and Android 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. We have one set of screenshots and we're done, and our support is much easier because we only have to train people once, and I only have to figure out how to fix something once, which is pretty awesome.
Right on. Sounds good. Well, thank you, Justin. I appreciate that.
Welcome.
Yeah, Heidi, this is Jeff at Rocky. I concur and agree with all that. That's why primarily we're using iOS here at Rocky as well. And I was wondering, Justin, what GNSS receivers are you guys using?
So we're mostly using the integrated receivers because the vast majority of our stuff, it doesn't need precision. We had been renting an Arrow 100 and been thrilled beyond belief with that. And then we also use a dual, I think it's like an XR 150, just so we can collect additional metadata automatically, because the integrated GNSS does not provide full metadata to collector.
Right.
So if you want full metadata automatically, we use the dual, which, again, no better accuracy. It's just a standard, recreational grade, WAS-enabled. But the Arrow 100 has been just a joy. We absolutely love the thing.
Yeah, we have several Arrow 100s here, and I was wondering if anybody in the calls had trouble connecting those to Android devices, because I'm with you. I have no problem connecting them whatsoever to iOS devices, but I've had a lot of challenges and a lot of glitchiness with Android with the EOS Arrow 100. So if anybody can comment to that, or if you got that figured out, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I tested them on I tested our Arrow on my personal Android devices and had nothing but trouble.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I did it on my own phone, yeah. And it just kept glitching and kept disconnecting.
So I'm the opposite. I have lots of problems with iOS and no problems with Android. So on personal or GFE. So I guess
I just wanted to chime in too with a couple of things about iPads and using iOS. So basically, we have iPads for most of the archaeologists in the office, and we've been trying to implement this mobile data collection kind of program where people are doing site condition assessments using the iPads, and we have to use Portal since we have sensitive data, and we have lots of issues with people getting logged out in the field and not having access to MPS Wi-Fi, not being anywhere near a place where they can get logged back in. And I don't know if that is specifically an iOS problem or not, but it does seem to happen quite randomly, quite often. And that's probably been one of the biggest holdups for us of actually being able to use this as a viable option in the field. But other than that, we have life-proof cases for them and ZEG screen savers, and nobody's ever done anything out in the field with it that has destroyed the device. They're pretty ruggedized that way, and we've had some overheat if they're left in the sun, but if you don't have them sitting out in the sun, they're usually okay. The other issue we've run into a lot with our iPads is basically people don't log into them enough when they're not out in the field during the field season, and then they get kicked out. And so it's been kind of a nightmare trying to make sure everybody keeps everything logged in and on time and working, so that when they need to go out, it's ready to go. And so that's kind of where I see one of the potential benefits to being able to switch over to Android that's set up for multi-people, multi-users to be able to use. So I think that there's probably, obviously there's, pros and cons both ways, but, I think it depends on what you're trying to do, a lot of it. So anyways.
Well, this is Neil. I want to chime in something here. The one thing we're working on right now is getting a new iOS Stig for data collection, and I realize it doesn't have the same needs as the Android Stig, but the main thing is screen timeouts and a 4-character login. And we are in the process of that right now. And if it takes anything like the last one, it could be 7 months from now, but we're working on it for whatever that's worth.
That's good news.
Right on. Okay, if you guys are all done, I'll move on to the next question. Joshua Van Buskirk says, if I change base maps, should I change transformation and collector? Yeah, Joshua, you definitely should. So you need to set up your location profile based on those 3 things: what data what your data's in, what your base map's in, and what your correction service is in. So you need to know all those 3 things when you're creating one. So if you change your base map to a different projection than a Web Mercator projection, then yeah, you'll need to change that. If you're just changing within the Esri environment from one base map to another, those are all going to be in Web Mercator, so that won't make a difference. It's just if you create your own that's going to be in a different projection, then you're going to have to change that in the location profile. Anybody else want to add to that? Are you guys good?
Well, I was wondering, Heidi, did you test, this is Jeff, did you test the vanilla NAD 83 base map? Because I was having problems with that, and it's better in NAD 83 2011.
Yeah.
And then there's an actual location profile. And also, I tried doing Colorado State Plain one time without 2011, and that wouldn't sync at all. So I was wondering how that went for you.
I didn't try the State Plain one at all. I did try the NAD 83 vanilla, and let me see if I can pull that back up here real quick. The first issue I ran into was I had a datum shift because I wasn't recognizing. Because I wasn't recognizing that WGIS84 ITRF 08 issue that Neil had brought up. Neil, do you want to talk about that a little bit more? Or maybe explain that a little bit?
Sure. In the context of the plain vanilla NAD 83 situation?
Yeah.
Yes. So there is a mathematical transformation that is accurate to 3 centimeters to get from NAD 83 2011 to ITRF 08 version 2005. In Esri, if you let defaults do default things, there will be, I think this is still the case, a no transformation that occurs between NAD 83 2011 and NAD 83. That said, they are different. From my understanding, and this same thing would be the case for NAD 83 to WGIS 84. But if you allow it to take the transformation that involves NAD 83 2011, you just moved it a meter. The way that I try to think about this is that when we created NAD 83, I wasn't there, but I imagine they had a great time. When we created NAD 83, it was effectively the same thing as WGIS 84, but we only knew where the center of the Earth was to within 2 meters. At the version of NAD 83 2011, many years later, we know where the center of the Earth is to within about 2 centimeters. And so by just selecting plain vanilla NAD 83, an assumption can be that the error was never, the accuracy was never better than 2 meters anyway. And I'm not speaking to the transformations that are taking place in Esri right now. I'm just speaking to the general theoretical stuff that took place to create these datums. So before you change something to NAD 83 vanilla, or you start going back and forth, it's important to go look at the actual transformation, and if there are numbers that are different from 0 in the Esri published page, then you'll know that you're actually making some adjustment to it. And I think that's where it came into with Heidi and Jeff's situation. At least that's my guess at this point.
So at the risk of oversimplification, can we make just a general rule? It's probably better to have your data in NAD 83 2011 and your base maps in that. If you're going to use your own base maps in Collector, just do that. And not
if
worry
you're going
about
to be working in NAD 83, yes, that's probably the right way to do it.
I'm just trying to summarize. Thank you.
There is no mathematical way to get back and forth in the other method. So the way you just mentioned would be the right way to do it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, to follow up on that, obviously, if you wanted to stay in the whole NAD 83 2011 thing, you'd want to use that, TIMS entry server to stay in that same correction service projection. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing is I tested that. That's what's kind of weird about these results is that the whole, let's see, what is it? The pluses in green are that test. That's exactly what I ran. So that's NAD 83 2011 data with a NAD 83 2011 base map using TIMS NTRIP server. And it didn't come out any closer than the UNAVCO NTRIP server did. So, but I mean, let's be honest, I was using an Arrow 100. So it wasn't like I was using a $20,000 receiver to really get perfect results here. This is just, looking at pretty much the common operating picture that most parks are going to be trying to do when it comes to just getting sub-meter data. So that may, if we came out here with a net R9 or something, or a R10, then maybe we would be getting a better bunch of results here. So does that all make sense, Jeff?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then Joshua followed up with another question on the collector base map thing, which was, does collector keep the base map in the projection of the base map that was in the original map I downloaded? Yes, collector doesn't change your base map. So if you made your own custom base map in, say, 2011, it's not going to change it when you load that up. Let's see how to do this. When you create your base map, so you kind of do two things when you're doing a custom base map. One, you sideload it onto your device because that's just easier than trying to download the whole thing. And then two, you load it up as a TPK into AGOL and then open that TPK in AGOL and add your data in that way. So that's how you're kind of getting around Esri's web Mercator system, is using your own custom base maps, your own TPK in AGOL with your own data. So I hope that answers your question. If not, Joshua, feel free to let me know and I can unmute you. T up in Devil's Tower said, has Justin's success with iOS had anything to do with the location in which he is collecting that is offering him better accuracy? I don't think so necessarily. Any of you guys want to talk to that? Justin, let me unmute you and see if you are interested in answering that question. It's more directed towards you. Oh, I can't unmute you anymore. Okay, yeah, I don't think so much, T. It's kind of a configuration thing. The part that I didn't understand that he was talking about when it came to location chips is my understanding, unless things have changed, maybe things have changed in the last, 6 months or so, but the location chip didn't at least used to be part of the data plan chip. So if they change that configuration, that's great. But on older devices, that's certainly still the case. But other than that, yeah, I can't think why he would be getting better accuracy from an iOS device, because he's Bluetoothing to an external receiver. So that external receiver is doing all the heavy lifting. Justin also wanted to say I should note that we use a lot of Survey 123. So he's been doing 123 a lot on his iOS devices, which is great news. And then he had another question. Has anyone tried using high accuracy GNSS locations in Survey 123? Is it even capable? Awesome question. I've asked that question a few times, Justin, and the answer is no, it's not capable. You can't put, well, the answer is sort of, I should say. You can't do it directly. There's a back door, and I can send you, and I will send you, Justin, the blog post for how to do this, but you kind of use Survey 123 in tandem with Collector to pull it off, but it's not a smooth system. And then we did ask about them adding the GNSS metadata fields option to Survey 123, and I've actually tested it by adding them. Survey 123 doesn't recognize those fields the way that Collector does, so it doesn't automatically populate them the way that Collector does, and that's not built in, and we don't know if and when that's ever coming. So yeah, unfortunately, no, Survey 123 cannot do high accuracy at this point. And Justin, I did just unmute you, so go ahead.
Oh, thanks. No, it's just what I need to know. I missed the previous question because my phone crashed. I heard like 2 words of it, so sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so T up at Devils Tower, she said, has Justin's success with iOS had anything to do with location in which he is collecting that is offering him better accuracy? What do you think about that? I'm not sure where you are, Justin, so.
I don't think so. We're based out of Rapid City, but our crews are all over the Midwest, or the upper Midwest, so everywhere from Devil's Tower to Badlands to, they're up at Theodore Roosevelt right now. But very few places with cell phone coverage, that's for sure.
Okay. Okay, and then Joshua, you had a question and you wanted me to unmute you, so I just did. Go ahead.
Oh, so what I was talking about in terms of changing your base map is we generally have like 4 or 5 different base maps on our devices, and while the map's open, you can change the base map to look at relief versus imagery or something like that. And in that case, if they're in different projections, does it change the projection that you should be, or the transformation you should be using?
So my understanding on that, no. If you side-loaded those on and they're just sitting on there as base maps on your device, that's not what's telling Collector how to collect your data. It's what that base map in the web map is. So that's why when you side-load those on, you also want to put that TPK up into AJOL and use that, because that's going to be what you're collecting in. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, got it.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Neil or anybody else want to follow up on that, if you guys have tested that at all?
I have not.
Okay, cool. I feel amazed that there's something I've done that you haven't, Neil. This is incredible. First time ever.
Please.
Well, I'm glad I had the time to do it, because I knew it was something that we've all been like wanting to know more about. So now I just really want to get out there with like a gold and really start testing this stuff to get some really definitive results. But we don't have one yet. We can't afford it. We're the Park Service. That's all I have for questions at this point. Again, you know, we've got a half hour over, but I kind of saw that one coming. Nell, did you have a question?
No, I didn't. No, I think you guys have covered everything in great depth, especially for the folks that are out there in the field collecting this type of data. It's certainly a moving target, and different things are going to work for different folks and different use cases. And so I think, you know, talking to your regional programs and to other folks that are currently out there in the field doing this is your best bet when you're trying to figure out what's going to work the best for you and your situation in your Parker program.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Neil and Amanda and Jeff for offering up their assistance. This, like Nell said, it's a moving target, and not any of us have been able to do everything when it comes to this. There's so much constantly changing, and so much testing that needs to be done to really understand this black box that we're working in. So I just really appreciate you guys taking the time to join us and help out with your expertise. If you guys have any questions, you can always send me an email or give me a phone call. I'm pretty easy to find on Bison Connect. So thanks again for your time, and good luck out there with your data collection. Please feel free to share information on the GPS listserv too, because we can all use the collective knowledge pool. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Great, and also a big thanks to Heidi. We definitely spent a lot of time looking at this, and this is for the benefit of everybody in the Park Service, so much appreciated. Thanks, everyone.